Today we have Clint from Subseven. This is a really cool interview for Cullen and I. Subseven, obviously, you guys never got like to the levels of fame that we would have hoped for, and maybe you guys would have hoped for. But
Yeah.
certainly, Subseven was a band that Cullen and I mean, Cullen, I would say it was probably one of those first bands that we've bonded over. Certainly
Yeah.
Blindside and like Norma Jean, but Subseven was one of those bands that early on in Cullen and I's friendship. We just would hang out listening to Free to Conquer all the time. So this is a really
Right.
special interview for us, mostly because Subseven is like one of those bands that kind of like mark our relationship, like Cullen and I's relationship. So
That's awesome.
super excited to chat with you. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. I've been watching for a few months and kind of seeing. It was Josh Porter's interview that really kind of connected me over. I was like, oh, this is awesome, and started following you guys, and I think that's how our conversations kicked off. So,
Oh yeah.
really cool. So, like, I'd spent a little bit of time with Josh way back in the day after Subseven. We were working with a nonprofit. I was doing documentary film work, and we went to India and we kind of hung out in India for a couple of weeks together. And I got to know him and his brother and a couple of other guys from the band. It was a good time.
That's awesome. That sounds like a blast.
Yeah.
That's good company. That's good company to be with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Josh seems, it's funny because like Showbread was one of those bands that was like always kind of like try to be like goofballs when it came to interviews, but like if you ever talk to Josh, at least now, maybe it was different or maybe it was same back then, but he's so sincere and so thoughtful, and it's funny to like think that their interview style, at least back when they like in their heyday, they were just like always trying to be as like ridiculous as possible.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you got like any sense of hanging out with Josh where he like still has those moments of being like really ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
Or
That
maybe
was
he's
kind
like
of our-
always thoughtful now. But anyway,
Yeah,
I always find that
absolutely.
really funny.
Yeah, we were younger then too. This was probably 10 years ago, maybe longer actually. COVID time kind of messes everything up, so you kind of lose like
Yeah.
track of really how much time has passed.
Right.
But yeah, and that's what I was drawn to those guys in general. Just super lighthearted and like not lighthearted, but I think just like chill and fun. And then the work that we were doing there was very important, and they were very sincere about that work. So just seemed like very genuine dudes in general. So
Yeah, that's
Love
cool.
it.
That's
Love
cool.
it. Let's talk about history of Subseven and how you got involved. Maybe even before we actually talk about like Subseven and the early part of those,
Yeah.
the early years, like early 2000s. How did you just get in music in general? What inspired you to want to start being a part of a band?
Yeah, I grew up. Wes and I both grew up in Southwest Oklahoma. Really, the majority of the band did. And Wes and I went to the same high school, same junior high, same high school. And there was, I think, for me, it was, I grew up in a very conservative Baptist upbringing, and I would say around the age of probably I was 14. It's so funny to kind of think about this stuff again. But I hadn't played a musical instrument or anything I played piano, but I wasn't really serious about it. My parents were just like, you need to learn piano. My grandma knew how to play piano. She was very talented, and she was in a gospel band with her like 8 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
Back in the day. They played once with Johnny Cash at a small church in Arizona. Yeah, just kind of wild. Like my grandma has this story of she's probably 13, 14, and she walks up to Johnny Cash and introduces herself, and he's like, "Hello, little girl," and just kind of in his voice, and like I remember her telling me that. And so music was always kind of a thing. Like when I was at my grandparents', my grandma would sit me on her lap, play country songs, and so I grew up around like a lot of the older kind of Western stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really got serious about music until I was 14, and the church I was with, we were in Omaha, Nebraska, and we were on a mission trip, which really it's just us passing out flyers for a church plant in Omaha, Nebraska. But one of the older kind of high school like people that they were driving around, one of the seniors, he puts Nirvana in the CD player. And I had never heard this before. I had never heard a lot of things, just growing up in a very sheltered, kind of insular kind of upbringing. And I didn't know what I was hearing, but I knew I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to do whatever that was happening. I wanted to be a part of something like that. And that was the hook for me. Was I didn't know who Dave Grohl was. I didn't know who Nirvana was. And actually, so it was 94. That would have been 94, 95. Kurt Cobain had already passed away. So like I was like way late to the game on Nirvana, right? I was just kind of learning about it. But I came home and I was just so stoked to play drums. I needed to figure this thing out because it just sounded incredible to me, and so many things. It just kind of clicked. It was really strange. It just kind of clicked. And so that was the thing that clicked for me, was hearing that. I came home and I started saving money that summer, doing odd jobs, and I bought my first drum kit. I had no one to play with, though. I was just like, I want to figure this out. And that is what kicked it off, I think, for quite a few things. Wes at the time had played guitar, and we were friends because of basketball. We played sports together, but we didn't have any musical connection or anything. And I was like hooked on figuring out how to start a band. And we started talking, and he had just gotten his license that next summer. And he was like, "Hey man, I'm going to go to Oklahoma City. There's this place called the One Cafe, or no, it's the Outer Cafe. The Outer Cafe." And it was a place for these kind of like smaller kind of punk rock shows. And he was like, "You want to go?" And I had to beg my parents to let me, for one, just go anywhere with anyone. But it was also like going to Oklahoma City from where I lived was like a 2.5 hour drive. So we would even say like, we're going to the city when we would go to Oklahoma City, right? Because I just lived out in the middle of nowhere. And I remember we went to this small venue, and it was Miss Angie, Cosmos Express, and Soul Food 76. 3 bands I'd never heard of, but I remember standing in the front, and there was probably a couple hundred kids there, just kind of, having a great time. And I remember just standing in the front like a statue, just staring at the drummers, just like focused in. And I was like, just trying to like, just observe and like learn. And that was kind of where it all happened. That ride home, I was like, "Wes, we need to start a band." He was already kind of playing some stuff at his church. And I was like, "I don't know what I'm doing, but we're going to figure it out." And that kicked it off. And my parents, for me, that was like the thing that like got me interested. And that was like my parents, or in anything really, my parents were like, they didn't understand that I was waking up in the morning, like, 6 a.m. to go into the barn and play drums up until I had to go to school. And then I would come home from school, do my chores, do farm chores, because we had cattle, we had farmland, we had all this stuff, and I would do all the things. And then I would go into the barn and just play drums until I was, it was time to go to sleep. I was infatuated.
I love that they were in the barn with like potentially other animals or whatever, right? Like,
yeah, it was actually the perfect setup, being in the middle of nowhere, trying to figure out how to play drums and wanting to just, and really there was no neighbors, right? So I could just play as loud as I wanted to. And and so that's what I did. And I just that's where it all kind of started. And slowly it turned into Subseven when we went to college.
Did you guys also practice in that barn?
We practiced in the garage. Wes had also had this, we called it the Extra Room. And it was actually one of the first songs that we wrote as a band, was a song called The Extra Room. And that was like in town. We would show up, but we could only play during certain hours because he had neighbors next door. And it slowly progressed to where we just moved everything back out to the barn. And that's where Subseven, that's where we did pre-production for the EP. Like our producer from LA came out and like hung out in the barn. I have some really great video and photos of like, it was so cold that we had to have this like one of those like kerosene heaters kind of blowing in the background. So a lot of the like rough tracks that we were recording had this kerosene heater in the background just blowing, but it was so cold in that barn. But we did it. And our producer was like, "What have I gotten myself into? Like, we we have to get you guys out to LA and do this.
These guys are country as hell.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, we were so green. I mean, it was, and this was like kind of like in the beginning of college. So first 2 years of college, we're forming a band. We met our bass player Reed kind of in that time, and we were a 3-piece, and we started playing shows, and then we added Smokey, who was our first guitar player. He's the one who he wrote most of like what you hear on the EP, or a majority of that. Like he wrote Emotion and Dirt Roads, and was a huge influence on the band, and part of really kind of us changing. Like I should back up a little bit. Like our first name, because we both were really influenced by Tooth and Nail bands, 7 Ball magazine. That was like our hook. That was our hook into culture. Getting those magazines delivered. Oh gosh, I just remember getting those in the mail, and it was just like Christmas. Like, yes, finally, like I have something new to kind of pour over. And so 5 Iron Frenzy was like a huge influence in the early days. And Wes was like, one day he's like, "Hey man, I think I got a name for our band." And I was like, "Okay, what is it? What do you got?" He was like, 73 Cent Rampage. And I was like, it sounds a lot like 5 Iron Frenzy. And he goes, "Yeah, but I think it'll work. I think it'll work." And I was like, "All right, let's go for it." So the beginning, it was 73 Cent Rampage. We had t-shirts made and stickers, and we just went for it. And so fast forward to college, and Smokey's like, "We need to change the band name." He's like, he's kind of like, it's so funny because we were so rough around the edges, and Smokey was and still is this like very polished, like disciplined guitar player.
With a name like Smokey, that's not what I would have imagined, right?
Right. Oh yeah, totally. But just was very much like, we got to get serious about this. And so we did, and we started playing anything that we could play. And then things got really serious about 2 years in. We had a manager, and our manager was the same guy who was the manager for Pillar. And so we had this kind of connection in the very beginning with some of the bands on Flickr Records, and then Pillar, of course. And that really opened doors for us to start thinking about maybe we're, if we get serious about this, we can go on tour and do the thing we want to do. And so that's kind of where it all kicked off. And from there, it all just kind of is a blur. So many things happened in that, like 2004, 20 years ago, actually, this month was when we released Free to Conquer. Mm-hmm. And actually it was in April, I think, but it was like around this time that we were gearing up to do all that stuff. And we were recording the music video for Emotion. Actually, no, it was the EP. I should back up. The video for Emotion came out in 2004, somewhere in there. So it's close. It's somewhere in that time. Time is
Free to Conquer came out in 2005. So
okay, there you go. There you go. Yeah, so the EP comes out in 2004. We recorded the music video for Emotion in downtown Oklahoma City. We had signed to Flickr like just a few months before that. I got married and like right around that same time, and life was happening. I mean, just so many things were going. And we went to LA and recorded the EP. And in that time, Smokey decided, he was like, I don't want to tour. I don't want to do any of this kind of stuff. And we're like, wait, what? Like we had already supposed
to be the serious one.
Yeah, exactly. We had recorded this like rough demo and everything else. And so we were like now searching for we needed another guitar player, and we ended up getting 2 other guitar players. So Jake and Caleb, who joined the band, who everyone knows is Subseven, they joined the band around that time, and we signed on the dotted line and went and did the thing. So. And quit college. All of our parents not super stoked about that, but we all quit college.
Did you go back to college?
I did not.
Good move. Good move.
Yeah.
Damn.
What I find really crazy about this is, that was like the start, but that was also pretty near the end.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to kind of talk about like why things broke up? I mean, see, this was like this for me and Mason. This was like the big disheartening thing was we're like, this band is so good, and we want to keep getting more music like this, because it's so it's exactly what we wanted. I would go so far as to say that like I think that Free to Conquer is like one of those albums that's perfect. Like every single song is an absolute banger. So I've been waiting 20 years for, a follow-up.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that there are quite a few things I would think about in that kind of span of time that happened. Everything happened really fast. We went kind of from 0 to 60 in a really short amount of time. And we were wanting it. I mean, we definitely were hustling for it. And I think that like, I can remember that summer before we signed with Flickr, we played this, it was like the Battle of the Bands in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And Tooth and Nail Records is there, and Mono versus Syria, and all these labels that we knew and wanted to be a part of were there. And we played the thing, and it was great. And we ended up like winning the thing. And it was like, we were kind of riding the high, and it was like, okay, what's next? And then right after that, we went to Cornerstone and played Cornerstone for the first time, and had the absolute worst show I can remember. At least from my perspective, it was like, damn it, we did not do good.
Well, what went bad with that show?
I think it was a couple of things. I think we were not well rested as a band. We had just been going and going and going, and we had troubles with our van when we got there. The van actually broke down, and Cornerstone, it's like triple digit heat. You're just like, it is what it is. And I feel like there was also a huge anxiety on the band to perform well. I remember playing and looking out, and I saw Brandon Ebel from Tooth and Nail in the crowd, and I saw Chad Johnson and a few others that I knew from that kind of world of Tooth and Nail. And I just, I felt like, oh man, we're just off. Like I just knew we were off. And I don't, you never know. You never really know. These are just things that like, my personal thoughts of it, kind of like way I saw it happening, going down, was like, we weren't tight. We were kind of all over the place. We weren't really ourselves. And we were playing for quite a few people who just didn't know who we were. So the crowd, like wasn't clicking. And it just felt like a very off show. It's like, of all the shows, why this one? Why now? Kind of thing. And we had been talking with Tooth and Nail and stuff, and our manager had been talking with them, and there was like conversation about, what would it look like for Subseven to be on the label. But then also we're talking to Flickr, we're talking to a few others. And so we signed the deal with Flickr eventually, and we just went. And it was like, we recorded our first, we recorded the EP, we recorded some music videos. We did our first tour, which was with East West and Sky Harbor. And then Pillar took us out on tour, which was super good for us. Like that was us, Project 86, and Pillar.
That's a fun lineup.
Yeah, I think Falling Up was on that one. Or maybe more.
Shit. That's a really fun lineup.
Yeah, it was a good time. And that really that just opened the doors for us in huge ways. It was a long tour too. It was like 2 months or something like that, maybe 2.5. So it was like we broke it up into two halves. And I think there's just, for me, it was heaven. It was like everything I wanted. Like I was having the best time. I also was, financially, I was doing freelance on the side as a designer. So like I had my side hustle and I could go anywhere. And for me, it was like play music, get off stage, go sit in the back of the van, do some freelance design work. And then like, I was actually making a little bit of money here and there for some of the bands that we were touring with, and then other people we knew. And, but for everybody else, it was like reality hit pretty quick that some had homes, some had cars, some had responsibilities of just like financially needed to be met. And I can't really speak for those guys, but I just know from the things that I could see, like I think it was a strain on the band in general. And so you can kind of see like doing multiple tours. We did another tour with Pillar, and then Project took us out on another tour. And I think and then we did Free to Conquer kind of in the middle of all that. And I remember recording Free to Conquer, and but kind of midway through, we had to drive back to Tulsa and play a festival what Blindside was at and a few others. And I remember just everybody was kind of like tired. Everybody was kind of worn out. And reality is like, I think that like hindsight's always 20/20, but I think if you could have told us at the time, just take a time out, like maybe just take like a couple of weeks off, or maybe just take like a month off and like give yourselves a break to kind of absorb what's happening right now, take care of some responsibilities, kind of like, and then let's reconvene and see. But the label was like, go, 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 go. And our manager was like, go, 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 like do things, like we got it. We have things to do. And that's the kind of the way it is. I mean, with most bands. And I think that I feel like, honestly, I think we just weren't ready for that at the time. I feel like there was a lot of outside pressure for individuals. And I remember right around the time of, we played Warped Tour, played a couple of days on Warped Tour. And I remember, our bass player just being like, I'm done. I'm kind of out of this. Like, and this was like, 2000, like early 2005. So Free to Conquer is just about to hit, like just about to be released. And, and so going, okay, so what do we do? What are we going to do? And then once that was like, he said that, and then Jacob, our other guitar player, was like, yeah, I think I'm not really cut out for touring. I don't want to tour or something like that. And so then you have the three of us left, and then you start to kind of figure out, well, what's next? And, we added a couple members at the time. We added Sean and Evan to play, like, kind of, because we had other tours coming up. We were talking with, at the time, this would have been one of those tours that I think would have blown the door open for us. But we were talking with Paramore to go on tour with Paramore, like a European tour with Paramore. And like, that would have been
like one of their first
that
tours,
was
right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So that's
like
2005?
Yeah.
I mean, like, Haley would have been like 16 or something. I mean, she would have been so young.
Yeah, it's somewhere back in then. And it's just, these are things that like our manager's like, hey, these are the people I'm talking to. Here's what's coming up. And then everything kind of started to break. And so we, in a break in a way that like people were just burnt out, like straight up burnt out. And I'm just going, this is awesome. Like, I'm just having a time of my life. And I think Wes was too. Wes was also kind of like, we're just going to make this happen. We're just going to make this happen. This is what we want to do. And no dissing those other guys. Like, I think we're all still really tight. Like I was just saying kind of before we kicked off, like we've been in a group chat for the past decade or more, just kind of talking about life, everything that's kind of going on. We're all parents now and we all have real jobs and all the things.
Also, what's the group text name? Is it like some sort of Subseven reference?
I think it's called, now it's been changing. It's let me look. It's changed a couple of times.
I love these, by the way. They're always good names.
Right now it's Dads with a Z. Dads of the band. That's perfect. That's our current. But I think that like that's in our last tour was like we did 2 weeks with Stryper, which was the weirdest thing ever. And it just was so weird. Like they had decided to come back again, or when it is one of their many kind of comebacks. And there's Michael Sweet's son was like, had heard of us and was like, Dad, you need to get this band to open for you. Kind of like this will maybe bring some of the youth out to to Stryper shows. And there we are playing like House of Blues Chicago and all these really cool venues with Stryper. And it actually turned out to be like it was really kind of wild. Like it was fun and weird and nothing I ever thought we would be doing, but there we were. And so I think, and then it just kind of so we recorded. We came back to Oklahoma City and we decided that like we'll do one more music video. We're gonna do a music video for Hold On, and we set up this shoot at the Green Door in Oklahoma City, which was a really cool venue back in the day that we all loved, and we invited it was probably like 400 or 500 kids that came to the show, packed it out, and we shot the video. But then we announced on the stage that night, we're like, this is also our last show, and we're going to play one last set for you. Kind of, this is the last one. And did that. And then it's all kind of a blur. Like, it's weird. Like, we all kind of just went our separate ways. Like, I got really heavy into like doing design work and joined a bunch of nonprofits and started a nonprofit, the heartsupport.com that started that was actually born out of time in Subseven. Jake from August Burns Red, he runs it now. So if you go to an August Burns Red show, you'll see Heart Support stuff everywhere. But that actually started in the back of the van on tour with Pillar. Just kind of, learn, like, hearing things from kids that came to our shows. They would just kind of dump on us, like, all the things that they were kind of like, your song spoke to me in this way or that way, or I'm dealing with self-injury, or I'm dealing with suicide, or I'm dealing with whatever. And being a kid from, Podunk, Oklahoma, not knowing really how to like respond to that, going like, well, what can I actually do to like kind of respond and help? And so Heart Support was born out of that, and started selling t-shirts on MySpace and just donating it to like hotlines back in the day. So this is like just, teen hotlines or suicide. I just didn't know what to do, but I wanted to do something. And so fast forward a few years, and heartsupport.com started, and it became like a legit nonprofit, and ran that for a few years as well. So that's I don't think most people know that, but that's kind of,
I've only known it as like like August Burns Red kind of Jake sort of thing. And I didn't have any idea that actually started from you.
Yeah. So the tattoo on my wrist here.
Hell yeah.
That's awesome.
And that was also connected to, like, after music, because of all my connections with nonprofits and things of that nature. I was doing freelance, but I went to work as a creative director for XXX Church at the time. Mm-hmm. So when I was there,
the guy's got a marijuana business now.
He's got a lot of things going on right now. He's a trip, but Craig and I had met a long time, like kind of in music. And he was like, I need some help with design. I love your design work. And that opened up a ton of doors for me to go forward and really step into being a designer and doing all that. And that's also where I was able to start Heart Support. So we moved to Grand Rapids. That's where XXX Church was located at the time. I played drums at Mars Hill. So Rob Bell's Mars Hill Church, played drums there for a little while after Subseven. And then his brother John, Rob Bell's brother John, and I and Craig really poured a ton of time into launching Heart Support. And we did a tour with the guys in Family Force 5, the Heart Support tour. And Spoken was on that tour as well. And and just kind of did that. And that was, a ton of fun. And but then eventually, like, I kind of stepped away from all of that. Like, I really stepped away from like nonprofit land, from churches and all that, and just got really focused in on design. And that's kind of what I've been doing the past, I guess, decade. This year, actually. Yeah.
Wow. Do you have your own, like, a name for your design company?
So I did. When I first started, I was freelancing. I freelanced, and then for about 5 years, and that was like doing anything for bands. I wanted to work with bands quite a bit, and I worked with nonprofits. And that's how Josh and I from Showbread kind of crossed paths. Was doing I was doing anything creative. I would just say, like, yeah, I'll go shoot that video. I'll go make an animation. I'll do whatever. I was just kind of like hungry to make stuff. And so that's kind of where I started. And then about 10 years ago, actually this year, I started focusing on product design and just focusing on like software design. And I really loved creating things that within that kind of the crossover of technology in general. And Heart Support was a big part of that too. Was like, we had an online kind of chat. You could chat with a counselor, that kind of thing. And I loved that kind of that crossroads of really good design, but with technology that was like moving people and connecting people. So still kind of, around the MySpace time of things is kind of when that was. So, yeah. And then that's kind of where I got really serious about, I'm going to be, I want to create things that, and so now today, like I'm working for a company called Transient Labs. So it's like transientlabs.xyz, and it's focused on it's a platform for creators in the Web3 space. So just creating a space for people to make art of all types, and kind of as everything is kind of evolving in that space. It's a lot of what we're working on right now is like tools for musicians, artists of all types to be able to, put their art out in the world and in a decentralized way, and to have control over their money, their income, their royalties, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah,
I love that.
Interesting.
Is you've got a lot of creative endeavors, and it sounds like life's been quite fulfilling post Subseven. Do you have a craving to get back behind a kit, or to play in a band again? Like, is that a creative outlet that you wish was fulfilled a little more?
Yeah, I think it was like in 2015 we actually got back together and we did a 10-year reunion show, and that was all of us at that time were itching. We're just like, we miss it. And so I was like, let's do a show. Let's do like a, get back together and play. And we did like, it was a ton of fun. It was like 2.5 hour show where we did, because Subseven, a lot of people don't know, like our early stuff was very fast paced punk rock, like No Use for a Name and Mill and Cullen and Face to Face. Those were like our, first kind of influences. And a lot of that came from Smokey. And then we kind of moved into kind of the more screamo emo stuff, and then kind of dabbled a little bit in some of the like hardcore, post-hardcore stuff, and really kind of Free to Conquer kind of landed in this more like kind of indie rock kind of thing. So we were kind of like, we had like phases as a band, and I think that like that was all of us going, hey, let's give this a shot, have some fun. And it was a ton of fun. I mean, we played all that different eras. We brought all the members back. We kind of had, at one point, there was 9 of us on stage and just had a ton of fun at the Green Door, where we kind of did our last music video. And that was kind of the last time we tried to get together kind of in between that. There were some side projects that we did where we were just kind of playing around and seeing what would happen. And it's one of those things too, like after Subseven broke up, we got back together, and it was like Jake and Caleb and myself, and then Jake's brother on bass, and then a friend of ours named Tim on vocals. So Wes was doing his own thing. He'd moved down to Texas and was kind of doing a solo thing. And so those of us that were still in Oklahoma, we got back together and we recorded this record under the name Versa. And it's some of the best stuff. Like it's like, this is what Subseven would have sounded like had we stuck it around for another record. It was like kind of all in us, but it came out in this band called Versa. And it was so good. But none of it's been released ever. It's just kind of like, I
was gonna say, I've never heard of this, and
yeah, just rough demos, and it was so much. I feel like it was, again, that's why I look back at when we broke up and we quit. Had we just taken a time out, I think had better guidance around us of like, you guys are green and you're new and this has been a lot. We're going to take a time out and we're going to help you kind of develop a few things and write songs better and yada, yada, yada. That would have been huge for us, but we didn't have it. It was more like, we got to go. We got to make money. We got tours to do, to fulfill, things of that nature. And I think if we could have, and I don't think we had that in us at the time to like know that. We just knew like go as well. We want to play music, we want to be on tours, and we burned ourselves out. And I think had we been a little bit more calculated or had better leadership around us to go take a break, you would have probably seen a better band in general, a third record, maybe more. And I think we just didn't know how to handle it, to be quite honest. And we weren't even really like that pressured. I mean, again, we didn't even like reach mid-level status. We were still kind of trying to figure out like what we wanted to, who we were going to be, and trying to make a name for ourselves. Mm-hmm. I think we were just at the beginning. I feel like quite often when I think about that time. And so now it's like I've played in bands since then a little bit, I still have my last drum kit. I ended up selling, like I had like 5 or 6 drum kits at one point, and I sold most of them to go buy a power book and start my freelance work, and so I still have 1 kit left, and it just sits in the basement and it's got dust on it. And I don't really play much. It's so funny. Like I think about it. Playing would be fun. I would love to play again, but touring just makes me tired. When I think about touring and like all the things that go into touring, I just go, I don't think so.
Maybe that's why the Beatles did it. They just stopped. But they're the Beatles. They can do that, I suppose.
Beatles, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, Clint, one of the things about Subseven that I've always thought, and maybe you've had this thought, maybe other people have told you this, but there are very few vocalists where when I hear their voice, I'm like, that's exactly that person. You know, I think of like Jeremy Ennick from Sunday Real Estate. I think has a very distinct and unique voice. There's some others certainly. But when I think of Subseven in Wes's voice, I'm like, I just absolutely think he has such a unique voice. And did you get a sense early on, even when you were playing, you know, just like as like a bunch of friends or whatever, did you get a sense early on that, wow, this guy is really talented and has such a unique sounding voice? Because that to me, like that, when I hear Subseven, that's what I immediately think of is how unique his voice is. And then obviously you guys are good songwriters. You've got like, obviously you're a great drummer, great guitar work. But when I think of Subseven, I think distinctly of Wes's voice just sounding different than lots of other voices.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He set us apart on so many things. And he was always willing to try anything. So we, you know, that's what was, you know, if you look at our discography and all these like different styles that we tried everything. And he was always about it. He was like, I'm going to figure out how to scream. I'm going to figure out how to sing higher. I'm going to figure out how to like sing faster. We even tried rap rock at one time. I remember way in the early days, like
hanging out with Pillar too much.
This was even pre-Pillar. This was like our, and I was just like, we tried everything. And so that's, I think for sure, I think there's something about like, not only that, but Wes was always great at connecting with people on stage in a very genuine manner. And that's why I feel like so many times, and it's really what drew me to him as well as you know, as when we were in high school, just like his charisma and connecting with people and really caring about people where they are, observing the room, observing people's lives, what they were going through, and the way he wrote about all kinds of different topics and the way that he did, super creative. And I think about like, you know, that's why like so many shows, I remember we would spend sometimes a couple of hours, 3 hours afterwards, just talking with kids and people from all walks of life about all kinds of things. And it was Wes's work. It was Wes's like voice and, you know, his lyrics that were connecting with people. And that to me was like, we have something here. Like we, you know, and we have something that's like recognizable, and let's try to like keep going. You know, I think we were all kind of in that, but I think at the same time, we were also like very fragile, and we needed like I mentioned, we needed some you know, leadership around us to kind of guide us on things. But absolutely, I think that that's I always kind of bring it up. It's like listening to him. There's only been a few bands where I go like it's kind of reminiscent of his voice, but he definitely has this like trademarked sound. You know, and,
I'm sure you guys don't like necessarily regret a lot of things. You guys did what you could, but it does feel like there was a lot left on the table. And it sounded like, you know, when you were talking about kind of the history and the breakup and everything, how you sort of alluding to that, where it was like, I mean, a few of you sounded like, it sounds like you certainly still would have like been willing to tour. And it sounds like Wes was even wanting to, and obviously you even made some other music with some other projects. And so it sounds like there was just like stuff left on the table. And do you ever kind of regret that you weren't able to just like kind of fully capture that moment, especially knowing that sound, that sort of emo punk pop, whatever you want to describe it, like that sound was, especially during that time, was becoming a big thing. And it just feels like there was there was room for potentially, you know, not to say you were going to get to Paramore status, but there was definitely a lot of potential there where you could have, you know, been a band playing on Warped Tour or whatever, right? Like, does it feel ever where you're like, God, that could have potentially happened?
Oh yeah, I mean, there was. You can ask my wife. There were like probably a couple years, maybe 3 after we broke up, where I couldn't watch like movies about. I couldn't watch documentaries about bands, or I couldn't like go there. It was like I was still kind of mentally in that space of like it didn't work out. And she would be like, "Oh no, we can't." Like I couldn't watch the Johnny Cash movie with Joaquin Phoenix, for example, because I was so like that movie is just so silly to talk about. But those kinds of things like really would like put me in a mood, and I'd be like, "Man, we were like, you know, just the what if," because and there's just so much effort that we were all kind of putting into that thing too. That like I mentioned it, and also when we did the Versa thing. Like I got to, we all of us really writing these songs that like, these were like, this is what was kind of in our back pocket. This is what was going to basically like iron out, you know, kind of like the EP we did. And then the Free to Conquer, that third record was really going to be like our second kind of full length. Felt like, okay, that was it. And yeah, we got to scratch that itch, but you know, you do kind of go there sometimes and wonder. But I think it's just at the end of the day, it's like, I also was done. Like I was done when Wes was done, I was done. It was like I didn't have any kind of like vision for I didn't want to be a studio drummer. I didn't want to play in other bands really. I didn't really want to go tour again. It was like very mission driven. I was focused on drumming is a thing that I do for this thing that we do called Subseven. And the reason that we do it is because this or whatever. Right. And it was like, that was the focus. And when the focus was kind of like, well, it's done. I resigned to the fact that like, I think I did that. And now I'm going to turn this corner and go do design. And that has a purpose. And it has this kind of like, this very much like mission driven, like purpose filled. That's really a lot of kind of my drive is like, why am I doing this? I need to have some kind of like carrot to chase or some kind of thing to go after or some kind of like thing to build or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so for me personally, there were moments where I immediately after I had to kind of deal with it. I kind of had to come down off that high of like, especially going somewhere being in a band and like that to me I loved it. I absolutely loved like us going all the time and like meeting new people and exploring new places and all that. But when like I said, when Wes was done, I was done. I was like, okay, we did the thing that we set out to do and we got as far as we could have gotten. And I'm just going to be like happy that like we still talk to each other. We're still friends. We didn't blow up. We had a ton of fun with it, and slowly I kind of accepted it, and then like, it also helped too that I had my own life going, I was married. I became a dad the same year, 2005, that Free to Conquer dropped. And life was moving on towards dad life and all that was kind of starting. And so, yeah, I had like other things going on. I think if I was only buried in music, like, or not buried, but like just only focused on music, then it would have been much harder if I didn't really have any other like things going. But I was kind of stoking fires all around, trying to do other stuff. So, yeah.
I think if there's anything that can be said, it's that it was a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful moment of your life. But you've just lived a fulfilling life from the sounds of it. Like everything that you've wanted to do creatively, you've had the ability and the chance to do, which is not something that like 99.9% of people out there can say. That's such a cool thing.
Yeah. I definitely feel that for sure. I think that it's a huge privilege to get to do what we did. We got to quit school and go and play music and tour and do all these things and have fun. And that's what I want for my kids. I want my kids to kind of, for me, it's like, some people like go spend a year in Europe and, do whatever before you go to college or whatever. Like that's kind of what that was for us. We got to kind of find ourselves. We got to play with all these bands that we loved. I mean, getting to go on tour with Project 86 was like, it's a huge dream of mine. I remember we got to open for POD and Blindside and MXPX in Denver where the Nuggets play. And I remember like going up on that stage and going like absolute huge, just, what's the imposter syndrome of like, we don't belong on this stage. Like we don't, and it being like one of our best shows. And, just so many like little things like that where I just go, yeah, like that kind of scratched the itch. That was like the thing for me, was like getting to do that. And then now like these days hearing like from fans, people that know us, just when are you guys gonna get back together? Like if you go to our Facebook page, there'll be stuff like, when are you guys gonna come back together, and when are you guys gonna play again, and all that kind of stuff. It's just kind of fun. But like I think just really thankful in general, just got to do something like that,
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully you can get to Furnace Fest.
Yeah. Yes.
Have you been waiting for a call?
No.
Well, let me ask this. If you were to get a call, do you think that the rest of the guys would be on board to join in?
Yeah, I think they would. Yeah, I think they definitely would. Yeah, I think that there was I think it would definitely be a conversation. Now, who would come to that to watch us? I don't know. Like, I don't know if anybody really remembers this after all this time, but
I think you'd be surprised.
You'd be surprised. Lots of bands have reunited at Furnace Fest thinking that exact same thing, and then they realize, wait, that entire shed is filled up right now. Like, what's going on?
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It'd be fun.
Well,
It'd be sweet.
So 2015 was the last time you guys played. That's 9 years ago now, or almost 9 years ago. And so we're getting closer and closer to it being, that was 10 years ago. And so that means we're getting closer and closer to 20 years ago that Free to Conquer came out. I mean, is there any sort of itch to do anything, whether it's like a Furnace Fest type of thing or any other kind of shows, or is there even maybe something beyond that where it's like a creative itch to like maybe make something again or whatever? Because I think we're like in a day and age where, 20 years ago, it probably feels pretty unlikely that you can get 5 people to creatively figure something out, but and make that happen. Whereas now, like, you get people that are in a band and they're all across the country and they can like send files to each other really easily, and we see that more and more now. We interview bands all the time where the band members are all across the country and writing a thing here and there, and it's like, all right, can you riff off of that or whatever, and then all of a sudden you got a song. It seems more and more likely that could be a thing. And also, it doesn't mean that you have to like quit your full-time job to do it, and it doesn't mean that you're gonna have to like be away from your family for months and months on end. So I'm curious, like, is there any sort of itch knowing the possibility that it's easier and easier to make music, especially when you're miles and miles and however many miles apart that you are from other guys in the band?
Or release the Versus stuff.
Right. Yeah. I think we've actually talked about a couple of years ago. We talked about releasing Free to Conquer as like a vinyl record, maybe like doing new artwork or something for that. There's also some tracks that weren't released on Free to Conquer that never saw the light of day. So there's some things there that are kind of fun to like put out and see what happens. The Versus stuff would be, we wrote, I think we wrote like 15 songs, something like that. And we played those songs we played like 4 shows, and that stuff would be fun too. Like there's definitely like the things there. Have we talked about that lately? No, we have not. And I think that I would say like, it's not an impossible thing. I think that it might be interesting to see if there's anything there. For me, I think it'd be rad if we did re-release Free to Conquer, and we on vinyl and just kind of put it out there just for fun and do short run and see what happens. I think that'd be kind of like one of those, kind of low, kind of easy to kind of do things, you know,
test the water.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Just kind of see what would happen. So if you look at our Facebook, like right after we did the 10-year reunion, we started to play, we started to play again, and we started to write music again. And then we had like a terrible thing with Caleb's, our guitar player, his son was killed in a car crash, and it put everything obviously in new perspective, everything. It shook us up tremendously as a group. But it put us on pause too for music. And I think we definitely tried. You can see on Facebook, you'll see some of the posts where we're kind of teasing different little kind of nuggets of things here and there, or track listings or whatever. But it was one of those things where we definitely tried, and then that tragedy happened, and then we just, I don't know, it feels like it kind of knocked the wind out of ourselves in a way that like we just never came back to it. So that was 10 years, that was however many years ago. I mean, who's to say it could potentially come back, you know, and be a thing. And that's why I think a lot about like, maybe it's just as simple as re-releasing, you know, Free to Conquer, or the EP and Free to Conquer together. You know, there's, you know, you have, you know, kind of two different versions of Game of Love. You have Emotion from EP, which was like really the track that kind of like got the most, I think, traction and attention for us as a band. But yeah, I'm not saying, I will not say that it's never going to happen, because I think I think stranger things have happened. So I'm up for it. Yeah.
We're all about it. I mean, I would love to see Free to Conquer, especially on vinyl. I'd buy that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Same.
All right.
Well, are we ready for the top 5 most influential albums of your life?
Yeah. Okay. This is gonna be really tough. I'm sure most people say that. I can definitely say that, you know, going back to first time hearing Nirvana, when I heard Smells Like Teen Spirit, that was kind of what set it off for me. Trying to play all those songs. Absolutely. I can't deny that the first time I heard DC Talk's Jesus Freak out of church camp, that, you know, that was not going, oh, wow, okay. You know, especially.
I mean, honestly, it sort of is like the Nirvana, or at least that song in particular, is like the Smells Like Teen Spirit for a lot of us. Not just culturally, but also the sound, you know, that kind of grunge punk sound is going on, especially in the drum work.
Well, I have a question for you guys on that. Do you think anyone who was like in that like Christian world, or slightly Christian adjacent world maybe, do you think that they had like that JFK assassination moment, like where like you will remember that moment forever with Jesus Freak? Because I remember exactly where I was when I heard that for the first time.
Same thing.
Mason, did you?
I mean, I feel like Jesus Freak might, I mean, Cullen, you're 2 years older than me, so maybe, I don't know if like that would have made much of a difference. You also had a sister that was like quite a few years older than us, so I wonder if that but I was the oldest one in my family, so Jesus, like I knew of Jesus Freak, I knew of DC Talk, but my first introduction to any of that music was Reliant K and Switchfoot, right? And I do remember the day that I saw Meant to Live on like MTV2 or Fuse or whatever.
Yeah, Fuse.
And then probably also seeing like Be My Escape with Reliant K. I remember seeing those music videos and quickly realizing like that just sound like there's something about the lyrics that were just different. And I remember my babysitter at the time, and I was probably like 9 years old or whatever, maybe 10 years old, and I remember I had like this summer babysitter, and she like grew up in the church that I grew up in and everything. And I remember asking her, I'm like, is there something I should know about these bands that are like different than the other, like Blink-182 or whatever? And she was like, "Oh yeah, these are Christian bands. They're playing at like a festival called Lifelight Festival in Sioux Falls, and it's all Christian bands, and so on." And so like I realized at that point, oh, I can listen to music that my parents are going to accept me listening to, and it's also not like Newsboys or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And it's also not lame.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's one of those. And I think I'll never forget when I got Project 86. It was Drawing Black Lines from Project 86. And I remember playing that in my bedroom, and my mom came in because I like lived in a home where like if I couldn't bring certain music into the house, like, or I would be grilled, I would be in trouble.
Same. Yeah.
So I had to like, it became like, contraband for me, and I had to sneak certain things in. And I remember a friend like Wes going, Project 86 is a Christian band. Like you could totally play that at your house. I was like, all right, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. And I remember playing that. And my mom came in and she's like, she saw that I had one of those disc players where you could see the CD spinning in there, and it was like red and black, and it just looked very like, it was just, you're hearing Project and it just looks like it's, for her, it was like, probably casting a spell on me or something. And, I remember going, yeah, Mom, they're a Christian band, here to read the lyrics. And she's like, kind of, okay, what? Okay. And my parents slowly came around to it. My mom slowly came around to it, and they were huge Subseven fans. But I had to like kind of hide stuff, it's kind of like, and that's where, a lot of this stuff was like you mentioned, like when I could find a band that was in that space of that I loved, that I could kind of listen to without having to be, concerned about, am I going to get grounded, or is this going to be taken from me and, destroyed or whatever. That was like, okay. And so, and I got into all kinds of things. There were all kinds of bands I was listening to. It was just the Christian bands that I was able to kind of listen to in public. And, but I had like my way of listening to whatever I wanted to. When I learned about the Misfits, and when I learned about really any of like the punk rock scene in general, when I learned about any of those bands, I would get the CD, or I'd have a friend burn a CD for me. And I had a secret stash of CDs in the barn. And the way I would listen to them is I had to like
all the shenanigans always happen in the barn. I feel like every country parent should know about this.
It all goes back to the barn. And I remember like stashing all this music in the barn, and then I would go drive the tractor because I had to plow fields and stuff. I would sometimes in the summer I'd be on a tractor for like up to 8 hours. And so I would have my Discman and, have my secret stash of music. And that's how I, so when I think about influential bands, I think about, there were those Christian bands that like really opened the door for me in a lot of ways, that allowed me to kind of, that did influence me. And I got to go to these shows because, they had the label Christian on them. But then there's all these other bands that like I had to kind of listen to in secret up until I was in college. And, so it's like, I remember one time I got the Offspring's, I can't remember the name of that record, the one with low self-esteem on it, or self-esteem on it. Sure. And I remember bringing it home, and I bought it at Walmart, but I had to like hide it in my starter jacket. And then I had to get in the van with my parents, and then I had to make it home. And then I had to go into my room and like go out to the barn and hide it. And my brother ratted on me. My brother was like, he's like a few years younger than me. And he was like, Mom, he's like, brother has a CD that cusses. That was his thing. It was like, it says, and I remember going like, I got to get a new plan. I got to figure out how to like get around my brother now. And
I hope you beat him with your drumsticks.
Seriously, man. But that was it. And so, influential records. And here's the thing too, like this is a whole thing we could kind of get into. I think you've talked about this with other guests as well, but just like what that kind of does to you mentally, where you're trying to like go like this. I'll paint this picture. I remember it was my first semester at college, and the college had a small little kind of bookstore, and they had a rack with CDs of like kind of top 40, but then also kind of other things every once in a while. I remember walking to the food court, seeing Deftones' White Pony on that rack, and like immediately looking at that and going, and then listening to it in the store and going, oh my God, this is incredible. But then like, I can't buy this. Like I'm a college student. Like I'm old enough to drive. I'm paying rent. I have like responsibilities. I'm not living with my parents, that kind of thing. And
I
it's
can fight for this country.
Exactly. It's in the back of my head, though. If you buy that, you're going to hell. That kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? And so I paced back and forth 3 or 4 times outside of the like little store, walking to the food court and back, and I kept looking at that CD through the window. Like, should I buy it? Should I not buy it? What happens if I buy it? Like, what are my friends gonna think? Like, you know, like what's Wes gonna say? Wes won't care. And then like going just that mental, like just trying to like make it okay. And I ended up going in and bought it. I still have it to this day. But man, that record was hugely influential to me. Hearing Abe Cunningham play drums the way that he does, and you'll hear it in some of the stuff on Subseven. Like it just was like, oh man, it's like Dave Grohl, Abe Cunningham. Of course, you know, some of the old like Led Zeppelin. Like you took any of the kind of old school stuff like that kind of is in that lineage of drummers, John Bonham and others. I would say definitely, you know, up there. But there's, you know, I would say that those, and then MXPX was a huge influence. You know, slowly going to Way the Buffalo is probably one of my favorite records. Probably not their favorite record, but one of my favorite of their records. And then I think if I had to name a fifth one, this is kind of funny too, but this is so weird. But like Delirious's record, I don't know how you say it. Is it
Delirious 5 or whatever?
Delirious 5.
That record, only because like I think it's not really so much influential. It's just a record I think a lot about is that in that time of kind of transitioning from being this kid at home and church kid and going into college and then being in, you know, playing at church during that time. So I played in the church band, and that was like a means of income back in the day. So I was making a little bit of money. That record comes up a lot because that record kind of is what we all like, not we, but like contemporary Christian music kind of copied, you know?
Yeah.
Like, became like U2, and it was kind of that whole thing. And so you had all these songs that were similar to that. So I think a lot about that. I don't think it's like influential, but I think it's one of those things that like it was such a part of like the background of so much life in those kind of first years of getting out of high school and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, they hold up. That's a damn good band.
Yeah.
I know that there's like a whole stigma around like, their worship music or whatever, but they hold up.
Oh yeah. No doubt. But then it's Face to Face.
No Doubt does as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Face to Face is probably one of the other ones, and Mill and Cullen. Like those are bands that like I will always love. You know, punk rock bands. Yeah. So,
you know, I got to say this: you might be the only person I know that is a punk rock fan that did not have access to punk shows.
Yeah.
I mean, like you didn't from the sounds of it, you know, growing up very rural Oklahoma, it doesn't sound like you were going to punk shows very often.
Not at all.
Most people fall in love with the scene and the feeling they get in a punk show, and maybe less so with the records themselves. So that part's kind of just wild to me.
Yeah, it was a huge influence, and I think that it's funny. Another band I think a lot about is Thursday, and I remember hearing Thursday for the first time. And I remember seeing them. I saw them at Lawrence, Kansas, at the Bottleneck, and not Sparta, but it was Sparta. You know, Sparta was the other half of the Mars Volta. Played with them, and that set like it was Wes and myself and Reed, our bass player. And I remember that was like huge a huge influence on us as a band. Seeing them play. Me seeing Tucker role play drums that night was also one of those like, damn, like that's it. Like that's the model. Like, you know, it was like a Dave Grohl moment for me. And so I think a lot about them. I think that kind of getting back to my point, I think if we had not heard, or if that scene had not showed up, we would have continued to be like a more pop punk kind of band, because Smokey drove a lot of that influence as well. And when he left the band, Caleb and Jacob brought some like more of the kind of screamo emo kind of post hardcore stuff to the band. And that shifted a lot of like what we were doing. So you'll hear like a song like At the Park, which is on our EP, which is total pop punk and a ton of fun to play. And then you'll hear like Mayday, or you'll hear, Family Secrets or Vampire. And those are like, that's Caleb and really Caleb writing a lot of those kind of like moody type songs, which I love all that stuff. But, you kind of switch guitar players up mid run, and then you get influenced in new ways. And then you that's why I think our stuff is so kind of all over the place. It's really kind of hard to peg us. Flickr had a really hard time marketing us. They really wanted us to be a CCM band. They really wanted us to go on tours with like Kids in the Way and some of the other bands on their label, Pillar, for example. And we just didn't fit. And I think that was another thing that really was frustrating. I think a lot about like our career in general. We were on the wrong label. We should not have been on Flickr Records. We should have been on Tooth and Nail or Made by Ramen or Filled by Ramen or Mono versus Stereo or some, we were like the misfits, kids that just didn't fit with the glossy CCM stuff. And
you guys were too cool.
They tried really hard to put us there, and we just didn't. It just wasn't us. And so, I think, again, I kind of look back, and you look at things differently now, and it's like, it is what it is. You just kind of like go, we gave it a run. But I do think a lot about like decisions that we made that we just didn't know what we were doing, but we really, really wanted to play music. We really wanted to go tour. So.
Oh man, I can't imagine just all the things that you'd have to be like trying to decide at such a young age.
Yeah, I mean, you're like children.
I mean,
still almost.
everyone's starting a life.
Oh yeah,
trying to figure out what's the right thing to do and what you actually want to do. It like creates like a knot in my gut.
Clint, what do you want to plug? Obviously, you've got like the design work. What do you want to plug?
Yeah, I would say like right now, I don't really have any music stuff. I kind of wish there was sometimes like a music project going on. There's personally like working on the stuff I'm working on for the future is at Transient Labs. So I think that's a space that I'm really excited to be a part of and building things in that world of like empowering creators of all types to put their work out into Web3 as things evolve in that space, and just helping to kind of craft that going forward. So I would say like check out transientlabs.xyz if you're into creating art or of any type, music, photography. You'll find some really cool stuff from like Jeremy Coart and others on there. That's like some incredible photography and artwork and things of that nature. So that's kind of the thing that I'm really focused on right now for this year. That's kind of like just helping to build some tools there and be a part of that community. And as that continues to kind of grow. So yeah.
Love it.
That's cool.
Great. Anything else you'd like to plug?
Oh yeah. So let me see here. I was going to pull this up. I don't know if you guys knew about this or not. I'm trying to find it. Going back to kind of my roots as growing up on a farm, being a drummer on the farm, kind of, I was in the FFA, all that kind of stuff. I was the vice president of my FFA chapter, by the way, 2 years.
That's
2 years
awesome.
back. And so didn't do any of the, the milk tasting or testing, kind of like Napoleon Dynamite. Didn't get to really get into any of that kind of stuff.
You didn't have a cow that got into the onion patch?
No, but I just, wasn't really into the whole like testing of the milk. But something that's kind of interesting that I don't know if you guys knew this. In rural drumming circles, there's a beat known to like herd sheep more effectively than any sheepdog.
Really?
Yeah.
What is it, like a certain time signature?
I'm a rural drummer, and I'm not familiar with this.
Yeah, it's called the baboons. It's like baboons. And
Okay.
yeah, it's a technique that like I just learned about this. Like, have you guys seen like Jeremy Clarkson's Farm, or do you know Jeremy Clarkson like from Top
I
Gear?
love Clarkson's
Okay.
Farm. That's one of my all-time favorite
Okay,
shows
well,
now.
he talks
Yeah.
a little bit about it on that show. It kind of remains a closely guarded secret, but yeah,
Huh.
Okay.
kind of
All right.
marrying, you know, being a drummer and, you know, being in that space is, for me, is like one of those like, wow, this is fascinating. Cool.
Have you tried
So
it?
what
Have you
happens
tried
if
it out?
No, this is like, I kind of wish I knew this. Like, this is something I learned about, you know, recently. But like growing up on a farm, like just thinking about how many times I could have helped my dad. Like if I had just you know, had the drum kit on the back of the truck or the tractor or something, I could have been.
Right. You know, so have you ever heard of the shepherd's note?
Shepherd's note. That sounds familiar.
So it's an ascending note that sounds, it almost has like an auditory illusion where it sounds like it's ascending forever.
Oh.
I think like Christopher Nolan does it in some like
yes.
Inception stuff like
okay.
that. So what would happen if you played the shepherd's note with the sheep herder's beat or rhythm?
Wow.
That's what I want to know. Like, do the sheep then just
That's
like
good TV.
Instead of like walking towards you, do they sprint towards you?
That's good
do
TV.
They just die?
Yeah, do they just die?
Their heads explode? Like, do they just fall over? Like, yeah.
Is also does this like shepherd's beat, does it work on any other kind of cat? Like, does it work on cows? Does it only just sheep?
I thought you were gonna say cats.
Does it get the cats finally? Is that the secret?
Apparently it's only it's like the you know, when like sonar, for example, sonar is at a decibel that like doesn't hurt sea animals, but if you or I or any humans in the water, our brains would explode. Did you know that?
Oh.
So sonar is on a level that like will kill you.
That makes sense.
Maybe this is what it is. I don't know.
Huh.
Interesting.
Well, you know, if there ever is any new Subseven music ever, I'd love to hear the this like shepherd's beat included at least at one song, right? I feel like it's necessary.
I'll get sheep just so I can test.
You got to do that for absolutely. That maybe that's the motivation we all need to make the next Subseven record happen.
Yeah,
sure.
I'm down for it.
Heard some sheep. You can get in that market. I bet there's not too many pop punk bands that are in the sheep the shepherd's market.
I think you're right on. I think it's a shepherd's market. We got to go after it. Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
All about it.
I'm down for it.
Great. I mean, hey, they're willing to abandon 99 for one. I mean, this is a dedicated audience. This is if they're willing to do that, they are willing to listen to a Subseven shepherd's beat song.
I like your logic.
So I'm all about that. Well, Clint, thank you so much for chatting about the history of Subseven. Again, this is a band that Cullen and I have been listening for years and years and years, and it really, again, is one of those kind of few bands that Cullen and I like first started our relationship, our friendship, being a big fan of and listening to, together. Back when they had the, like those iPods where you could put like a little splitter head jack thing. Cullen and I used to use that all the time listening to Subseven.
That's intimate.
That's how old Subseven is. You had not only iPod classics, but you had to have splitters for both people to listen to.
That's real.
Back in the 70s when you traded vinyl records back and forth, they called that trading wax.
That's right.
Mason and I traded wax as well, but it was real wax, earwax.
That's awesome.
So, thank you so much for talking more about it, Clint.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for bringing me on. This has been fun, and I'm glad we finally got to do it. This is awesome.
Yeah, for sure.